That massive T-Rex skeleton you took a selfie with at the museum? It's lying to you. You look at those towering bones and see a perfect, complete monster. But the reality is a lot messier. In over a century of digging, paleontologists have never found a single 100% complete T-Rex. Not one. Zero. What you're actually looking at is a biological jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, held together by plaster and guesswork. And today, we're going to find out exactly what we've lost to the sands of time. Picture this. You're standing in the grand hall of a natural history museum. The lighting is dramatic. The air smells vaguely of floor wax and old dust. And looming above you is the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's the celebrity of the Cretaceous, posing with its mouth open like it's about to drop the hottest mixtape of the last 66 million years. You look at that towering skeleton, count the ribs, stare into those empty eye sockets, and think, wow, what a magnificent, perfect specimen. I hate to be the one to ruin your childhood field trip, but that thing is a lie. In the entire history of paleontology, over a century of digging in the dirt, we have never found a single 100% complete T-Rex skeleton. Not one. Zero. Zilch. But wait, I hear you screaming at your screen. What about Sue? Okay, fair point. Sue, residing at the Field Museum in Chicago, is the gold standard. Discovered in 1990, Sue is the rock star of the fossil world. This specimen is undeniably impressive, clocking in at roughly 90% complete by bulk. That's an A- in any school grading system, and in the world of fossils, it's practically a miracle. It's like finding a Lego set at a garage sale that actually has most of the cool pieces. Scientists still argue, however, on how to actually quantify completeness. Do we count by the number of bones, the total volume of the skeleton, or the weight? Because while Sue has the bulk, she is still missing crucial bits, including parts of her tail and a few vertebrae. But you've been lied to about what you're actually seeing in those exhibits. Most of the skeletons you see mounted in museums aren't real bone at all. Real fossils are heavy mineralized rock. If we tried to mount a fully mineralized T-Rex skull on a standing frame without industrial-grade steel supports, it would crush its own neck. So what you're usually looking at is a mix of painted fiberglass, plaster, and a whole lot of artistic guessing. So why is it so hard to find a pristine, complete skeleton? Why does nature insist on giving us these 66-million-year-old jigsaw puzzles with half the pieces missing? To understand this, we have to talk about taphonomy. It sounds like a made-up word, but it's actually the scientific study of everything that happens to an organism after it dies, but before it becomes a fossil. And if taphonomy has taught us anything, it's that nature absolutely hates wasting good material. Imagine you're a T-Rex in the late Cretaceous. You've had a good run, ate a few triceratops, scared some mammals, but today is your last day. You tip over and die. In a perfect world, for paleontologists at least, you would immediately be buried in soft, oxygen-free mud that protects your bones from rot. But in reality, you've just become the biggest free buffet on the continent. Within hours, the scavengers arrive. We aren't just talking about microbes and beetles, we're talking about other dinosaurs. Paleontologists have found T-Rex bones with heavy bite marks that match the spacing of other T-Rex teeth. That's right, cannibalism was likely on the menu. If your cousin Terry comes along and decides your left leg looks delicious, he's going to drag it away. Boom, your skeleton is now 85% complete. Then comes the weather. Bones that aren't buried quickly get bleached by the sun, cracked by the frost, or trampled by passing herds. It's like trying to keep a sandcastle perfect in the middle of a rugby match. Scientists still argue whether most incomplete skeletons are due to biological scavenging or geological shifting. Did a pack of raptors carry the arm bones away, or did a river wash them downstream? This brings us to water, the great frenemy of fossil hunters. Most of the fossils we find are preserved in ancient riverbeds because sediment is great for burying things. But rivers also move things. Here's the thing though, water doesn't just wash bones away, it turns dinosaurs into boats. It's a gruesome phenomenon called bloat and float. When a large animal dies and falls into water, the decomposition gases build up inside the body, inflating it like a grotesque balloon. The carcass floats downstream, sometimes for miles. As it rots, parts fall off. A lower jaw drops here. A rib cage drops 3 miles downriver. The heavy tail sinks somewhere else. This creates what experts call a disarticulated skeleton. It's the reason why finding a skull connected to a neck, connected to a body, is statistically like winning the lottery twice in the same week. Even if the bones survive the scavengers, the sun, the trampling, the river, and the rot, they still have to survive geology. We are talking about 66 million years of earthquakes, shifting tectonic plates, and erosion. A T-Rex might have been perfectly preserved in 60 million BC, but an Ice Age glacier in 10,000 BC could have ground half of it into dust without us ever knowing. So, when you really do the math, it's not surprising that we haven't found a 100% complete T-Rex. The real shock is that we've found any of them at all. So, what's the deal with the pieces that are actually missing? You might think, who cares if we lose a toe bone? We have the skull, and that's the moneymaker. But in paleontology, the devil is in the details, and right now, the devil has stolen a significant chunk of the T-Rex's anatomy. Preservation has a size bias. Nature is excellent at preserving big, dense, chunky bones like the femur, thigh bone, or the massive vertebrae of the spine. These are the compact cars of the skeleton. Sturdy, heavy, and hard to destroy. But the smaller, delicate bones? They are the bicycle parts. They get washed away, crushed, or dissolved before we even find the site. This creates a massive headache for scientists trying to figure out what this animal actually looked like. Take the gastralia, for example. These are often called belly ribs. Unlike your ribs, which attach to your spine, gastralia float in the abdominal muscles between the sternum and the pelvis. They aren't connected to the main skeleton, which means when a T-Rex decomposes, these are often the first things to get lost in the mud or dragged off by a scavenger looking for a toothpick. For decades, because we rarely found complete sets of gastralia, artists drew the T-Rex with a sucked-in gut, looking like a sleek, athletic lizard. But when we finally analysed specimens like Sue that had preserved gastralia, the picture changed. It turns out T-Rex wasn't a bodybuilder. It had a dad bod. The gastralia formed a basket that broadened the torso, making the T-Rex barrel-chested and chunky. If you see a T-Rex in a movie that looks skinny, it's wrong. It should look like a powerlifter who enjoys a heavy lunch. Then there's the case of the furcula, or wishbone. You have one in your Thanksgiving turkey. For a long time, we didn't think T-Rex had one. This was a major arguing point for people who denied that dinosaurs were related to birds. No wishbone, no bird connection, they said. But hold that thought. It turns out T-Rex did have a wishbone. It's just small, delicate, and not fused to the rest of the skeleton. It wasn't until fairly recently that we identified them. It turns out we probably dug them up in the past, but mistook them for broken ribs or weird debris. Finding this single, fragile bone settled a century-old debate about the dinosaur bird family tree. And then we have the arms, the most mocked appendages in history. Historians and scientists still argue about what those tiny arms were actually for. Some say they were for slashing prey, some say they were for holding on to partners during mating, and others claim they were completely useless evolutionary leftovers, like the appendix or a manifesto on MySpace. The problem is, we are missing the context that a 100% complete skeleton might provide. We rarely find the arm bones fully articulated with the shoulder girdle and the muscle attachment scars perfectly preserved. If we had a Rosetta Stone specimen with perfect arms, we could analyze the stress fractures and muscle insertion points to see exactly how much weight they could lift or what range of motion they had. Without that perfect specimen, we are essentially looking at a forklift without the instructions and guessing what the levers do. But here's the catch. While everyone obsesses over the head and the hands, the part of the T-Rex we are most likely getting wrong is the tail. You see, the end of a dinosaur's tail is made of a series of vertebrae that get smaller and smaller until they are basically little nuggets of bone the size of a walnut. In almost every single T-Rex find, the very tip of the tail is missing. It's the first thing to get whipped around in a river current and snapped off. Why does this matter? Physics. The T-Rex is a giant seesaw. The massive head is balanced by the massive tail, with the hips acting as the fulcrum. Since we don't have a 100% complete tail, we are estimating the total length and weight of the counterbalance. If we are wrong about the tail length by even a few feet, our calculations for how fast the T-Rex could run, how it walked, and whether it could turn corners without falling over are all wrong. We think we know this animal, but because nature keeps stealing the end of the tail, we are basically guessing the engineering specs of the largest predator to ever walk the earth. So, if nature refuses to give us a full box of parts, how do museums display those magnificent, towering skeletons that look 100% whole? Well, they cheat. But they cheat with style. Since finding one perfect dinosaur is statistically impossible, paleontologists and curators often resort to building a Frankensaurus. They take the left femur from Rex A, the skull from Rex B, and the tail vertebrae from Rex C, and they cobble them together to create a composite skeleton. Think of it like trying to build a working car by visiting 4 different junkyards. You grab a transmission from a Ford, an engine from a Chevy, and doors from a Honda. Sure, you can weld it all together and paint it red, and from a distance, it looks like a car. But if you try to drive it, you might realize the transmission doesn't actually fit the engine. This happens in paleontology more often than you'd think. In the early days of fossil hunting, it was the Wild West. If a museum had a T-Rex with missing feet, they might just grab foot bones from a completely different predator found nearby, maybe an Allosaurus, and say, close enough. This leads to a massive headache known as the chimera problem. In Greek mythology, a chimera was a beast with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a snake's tail. In science, a chimera is a fossil species that never actually existed. It was just a mistake made by a scientist who combined bones from 2 different animals. Historians and scientists still argue about whether some of our most famous dinosaur specimens are actually chimeras. There is a raging debate right now about a creature called Nanotyrannus. Some experts swear it's a tiny, separate species of tyrannosaur. Others insist it's just a teenage T-Rex. If we use bones from a Nanotyrannus to fill in the missing gaps of a juvenile T-Rex skeleton, and it turns out they are different species, we have essentially built a biological lie. We've put the arms of a chimpanzee onto the body of a human teenager and put it in a museum. But the reconstruction issues get even weirder when we don't have any bones to borrow. When a T-Rex skeleton is missing a specific bone and we don't have a spare from another T-Rex, scientists look at the family tree. They look at the T-Rex's cousins, like the Daspletosaurus from North America or the Tarbosaurus from Mongolia. The logic is, well, they are related, so they probably looked the same. Now for the part nobody expects. We might be modeling the most famous American dinosaur based on its Asian cousin. Because Tarbosaurus skeletons are often found in slightly better condition regarding certain limb proportions, scientists have historically used them as a blueprint to fill in the T-Rex's missing data. But this assumes that evolution stands still. It assumes that a predator living in the humid swamps of North America had the exact same anatomy as a predator living in the arid deserts of Asia. That is like assuming a polar bear has the exact same skeleton as a sun bear just because they are both bears. If we are filling in T-Rex gaps with Tarbosaurus data, we might be completely wrong about how agile T-Rex was. We might be giving a heavyweight wrestler the legs of a marathon runner and not even realizing it. We are building these animals based on best guesses, composites, and family resemblances. And until we find that elusive, perfect skeleton, we won't know for sure just how much of our Frankensaurus is fact and how much is fiction. This brings us to the ultimate question. What happens if we actually find it? What if, tomorrow, a rancher in Montana stumbles across a hillside and finds the one? A T-Rex that was buried instantly in a landslide, protected from scavengers, sealed in airtight mud, and preserved with 100% of its bones, from the tip of the nose to the last nugget of the tail. It would be the holy grail of paleontology. It would solve the dad-bod debate instantly. It would tell us exactly how long the tail was, settling the physics of its running speed. We would finally see the complete arms, muscle scars and all, and know if they were useless nubs or deadly hooks. But a 100% skeleton might give us something even more valuable than bones: context. Usually, when we find a perfect fossil in other species, we get something called soft tissue preservation. We are talking about skin impressions, maybe even traces of internal organs. Or, dare I say it, feathers. The debate over whether T-Rex was covered in scales or had a coat of primitive feathers is one of the hottest arguments in science. Currently, we have found skin impressions from the neck, tail, and hips that show scales. But we are missing the back. We are missing the top of the head. A complete specimen could reveal that the T-Rex looked less like a giant lizard and more like a 6-ton murder chicken. Historians and scientists still argue whether finding such a specimen is just a matter of time or a statistical impossibility. With every year that passes, erosion destroys more fossils than we find. We are in a race against the elements. But here's the thing though, maybe the mystery is better. If we knew everything, if we had the perfect blueprint, the T-Rex might lose some of its magic. Right now, it's a monster that lives in our imagination as much as it did in the Cretaceous. It forces us to ask questions, to dig deeper, and to use our brains to fill in the gaps that nature left behind. We have spent over 100 years chasing this ghost. We have found its teeth, its skull, its ribs, and its lunch. We have named them Sue, Stan, and Scotty. We have learned more from these broken, scattered, imperfect piles of rock than we ever thought possible. So, the next time you visit a museum and look up at that towering, reconstructed giant, don't be disappointed that it's not all real. Be amazed that we figured out so much from so little. There isn't a single complete T-Rex skeleton on Earth, and honestly, that just gives us a reason to keep looking. So, are you team scales or team feathers for the T-Rex? Let me know in the comments below.